Okay, so you want to own a Mercedes dealership. Buy some premium land, put up a glass and steel showroom that looks like it belongs in a design magazine, park a few hundred silver and black cars under it, and watch wealthy people hand you money. That's the picture in your head. The luxury car guy, richest man in town, drives whatever he wants, retires at 50. Here's the problem. Almost none of that is how this business actually works. Let's start with the illusion, because the illusion is doing a lot of work here. Mercedes-Benz sells well over 2 million vehicles globally every year, and in the United States alone, its dealer network moves hundreds of thousands of cars annually, at an average transaction price north of $70,000. Big numbers, the kind that make a normal person think, I want in. But here's the part nobody tells you. Despite the badge, despite the price tag, despite the marble floors, the average luxury dealership still keeps somewhere between 2 and 3% of total sales as actual net profit. Sell a $100,000 S-Class, and if everything goes exactly right, the dealership might clear a few $1,000s once every single cost is accounted for. So how does an industry with margins that thin, wrapped around the most prestigious badge on the road, still produce some of the richest people in every American metro? That's the entire question this video is going to answer, and the answer has almost nothing to do with the cars themselves. Let's start with what you're actually buying into, because a Mercedes franchise is a completely different animal from a mainstream Ford or Chevrolet store, even though both wear the word dealership. A luxury franchise like Mercedes-Benz flips the volume equation entirely. Far fewer cars move through the lot compared to a mainstream store, but each one carries a dramatically fatter margin, and the buyers aren't nearly as rattled by a bad month in the economy, because the person financing a $130,000 G-Wagon isn't the same person stretching to afford a Corolla. The luxury segment as a whole is expected to keep growing somewhere between 8 and 14% a year, driven by a simple fact: the number of wealthy people in the world keeps climbing, and Mercedes has spent decades building a brand that sits at the exact intersection of engineering prestige and old money status. The catch is the buy-in. Building a facility that meets Mercedes-Benz's own corporate identity standards costs dramatically more than a standard showroom, because the manufacturer doesn't just want a building, it wants a very specific building, with prescribed marble, prescribed lighting fixtures, prescribed glass curtain walls, and prescribed customer lounge amenities that mainstream brands would never require. This is the trade-off baked into the entire luxury tier. Expensive and restrictive as it is, it's also the version of this business built to survive a bad year, because a Mercedes store stacks the exact same 3 profit engines as any dealership, just on top of a customer base with dramatically deeper pockets. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to get through the front door, because this is where the fantasy usually dies. A Mercedes-Benz franchise requires significantly more capital than a mainstream brand, often crossing well past $10 million just to open the doors. Not to get rich, just to open. It starts with the franchise fee itself, the check you write directly to Mercedes-Benz USA for the right to sell their badge, and for a premium import brand like this, that fee alone can run past $500,000 before you've poured a single foundation. Then comes the land. A Mercedes facility needs somewhere between 4 and 8 acres, enough room for a showroom built to exacting brand specifications, dedicated service bays for a lineup that includes complex AMG performance models and electric EQ vehicles, and enough parking to store the enormous rolling inventory a dealer is contractually required to carry. Because Mercedes mandates a concrete tilt-up or glass-heavy architectural build, rather than a basic pre-engineered metal structure, construction costs run dramatically higher than a mainstream store, often landing between $250 and $450 per square foot. And Mercedes-Benz, like every manufacturer, doesn't just want a building, it wants proof you can survive one. Luxury franchise applicants are typically required to show significantly more liquid capital sitting untouched than a mainstream applicant, often well past $1 million, plus a total net worth stretching into the multiple millions. This isn't a suggestion. If you don't clear that bar, you don't get the franchise, no matter how much you want it. Add licensing, legal fees, and state bonding. Then add the dealer management technology. every modern showroom runs on. And that's before you've bought a single car to put on the lot. Which brings us to the part where the real money starts moving. Inventory for a Mercedes store doesn't work the way you'd expect either. You don't call up the factory in Stuttgart and order what you think will sell in your market. Manufacturers control the flow of new inventory through a system called turn and earn. The dealers who sell fast get rewarded with more of the best allocation next cycle. The highly optioned AMG models, the limited-run electric vehicles, the cars with the fattest margins built in. The dealers who sell slowly get starved, stuck moving whatever's left over. It's a compounding cycle, and in the luxury segment it's even sharper, because Mercedes holds back a meaningful share of its most desirable, most profitable trims, purely at its own discretion, using that allocation as leverage to reward performance or push dealers into facility upgrades and electric vehicle charging infrastructure they might not otherwise choose to fund. Used luxury inventory is sourced differently too, largely through lease returns, since a huge share of Mercedes buyers lease rather than finance outright, meaning 3 years later, that same car comes back to the dealership as a certified pre-owned unit carrying real margin, alongside wholesale auctions where luxury vehicles command their own specialized lanes and their own premium buyer fees. None of this is paid in cash. Almost the entire inventory sitting on a Mercedes lot is financed through floor plan financing, a revolving credit line where a lender fronts nearly the full cost of every new vehicle, and because luxury inventory carries a dramatically higher sticker price per unit than a mainstream lot, the dollar amount of debt sitting on a Mercedes showroom floor at any given moment is staggering, even though the number of physical cars looks modest by comparison. Here's the trap most first-time luxury dealers walk straight into. Inventory sitting on the lot isn't neutral. It's bleeding money every single day it doesn't sell, and because a Mercedes vehicle costs so much more per unit than a mainstream car, the daily holding cost per vehicle is dramatically higher too, easily climbing past $100 a day once you account for floor plan interest, insurance, and straight depreciation on a car whose electronics and options age faster than the sheet metal around them. Scale that across a lot carrying 80 or 100 vehicles averaging over $70,000 apiece, and a slow month doesn't just cost you a little, it costs you tens of thousands of dollars for absolutely nothing, just the cost of premium metal sitting still under the lights. And it gets worse the longer a car sits, because floor plan agreements include curtailment clauses, forcing principal payments out of pocket if a vehicle hasn't sold within roughly 90 to 120 days. At which point dealers are usually forced to discount an S-Class or a GLE far more aggressively than they'd ever want to, just to get it off the books before it becomes a bigger liability than it's worth. So you've spent well over $10 million to open the doors. You're bleeding money on unsold six-figure inventory every single day. How does anyone make a living doing this? Here's where the whole picture flips, because the money isn't where you think it is. Everyone assumes the dealer makes their money on the sale of the car, and that assumption is mostly wrong, even at the luxury tier. The front-end margin, the profit on the actual metal, has been shrinking industry-wide, thanks to the internet giving even luxury buyers instant access to invoice pricing and competing quotes from other Mercedes stores across the region. So where's the rest of it coming from? The finance and insurance office, the room you sit in after you've already agreed to buy the car, generates a huge share of a dealership's entire gross profit, and at the luxury tier this room works even harder, because the products it sells scale with the price of the car. When you finance or lease a $100,000 Mercedes, the dealership isn't just connecting you to a lender, the bank offers the dealer a wholesale rate called the buy rate, and the dealer is legally allowed to mark that rate up before presenting it to you, pocketing the spread on a loan balance that dwarfs a mainstream car loan. Then there's the extended warranty and the gap insurance, and because German engineering carries genuinely expensive repair costs once the factory warranty expires, extended service contracts on a Mercedes sell at a premium most mainstream buyers would never accept, often carrying markups of well over 100% above wholesale cost. Some dealership owners at this level don't just sell these warranty products for a one-time commission either. They set up their own offshore reinsurance companies, specifically to capture the underwriting profit on every contract sold, letting that premium compound quietly in investment accounts, completely separate from whatever happens on the actual sales floor. But even the finance office isn't the most profitable room in the building. That title belongs to the service department, and at a Mercedes store this department is a genuine gold mine, because fixed operations, meaning service, parts, and the collision center, typically account for a modest share of total revenue, and yet generate roughly half the dealership's entire gross profit, with margins running well above what you'd see selling the car itself. Why does this matter so much here specifically? Because a Mercedes owner who just spent six figures on a car rarely takes it to an independent mechanic. They bring it back to the dealership for factory-trained technicians and genuine parts, and German luxury vehicles require more frequent, more expensive specialized maintenance than almost any mainstream vehicle on the road. Car sales are moody, swinging hard with interest rates and consumer confidence, but a Mercedes still needs its scheduled maintenance regardless of what the stock market is doing. And fixed operations is the department that doesn't panic during a downturn, quietly covering the building's overhead so that every car sold on the showroom floor afterward becomes closer to pure profit. Now let's talk about the price on the windshield, because it's not really the price. You negotiate against the manufacturer's suggested retail price, working your way down toward what you think is the dealer's actual cost, the invoice price, except that invoice price is inflated on purpose by Mercedes-Benz itself, and after the car is sold, the manufacturer quietly refunds a percentage of that back to the dealer as a holdback check you never see on any piece of paper. On a $100,000 car, that holdback alone can be worth thousands of dollars in guaranteed profit the dealer already built into the math before you ever sat down at the table. And once you are negotiating, the dealership uses the exact same four-square tool every other dealer uses, splitting your trade-in value, purchase price, down payment, and monthly payment into 4 boxes, designed to keep you from doing math in your head. Except at the luxury tier, the dollar figures involved make the stretched loan terms and quietly protected margins even more consequential. None of this means the business is safe. It's leveraged from top to bottom, and because the average unit on a Mercedes lot costs so much more than a mainstream car, that leverage cuts harder in both directions. An increase in interest rates doesn't just make a lease payment less attractive to your customers, it directly increases what you're paying every single day just to hold six-figure inventory. Manufacturers can also reshape your entire business model overnight, and Mercedes-Benz has pushed its own dealer network hard on electric vehicle infrastructure investment in recent years, requiring significant capital commitments toward charging stations and specialized EV training with no guarantee that consumer demand for electric luxury vehicles will arrive on the timeline the factory originally projected. So how do experienced owners protect themselves against all of this? They stop owning one store and start owning several, often pairing a Mercedes-Benz franchise with a Sprinter commercial van franchise or another luxury badge under the same corporate roof, sharing one accounting office, one HR department, and one finance reinsurance pool across multiple locations, cutting overhead no single store owner could absorb alone while diversifying against a rough year for any one brand. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question: how much money do you make if you do this right? A well-run Mercedes-Benz dealership can pull in well over $80 million a year in total sales, given the average transaction price, clearing somewhere between 2 and 3% of that as net profit, propped up heavily by the finance office and the service department just to keep the lights on. The owner's official salary usually looks almost ordinary on paper, but add distributions from dealership profit, add rent from land often held in a separate company and leased back to the dealership at a premium rate, add dividends quietly flowing out of an offshore reinsurance structure most customers will never know exists, and total compensation for a successful Mercedes dealer routinely reaches into the millions. So is it worth it? This isn't a business for someone without serious capital, and it isn't passive income under any definition of the term. It demands tens of millions of dollars in leveraged debt before you sell a single car, total dependence on decisions made in Stuttgart, and constant navigation of a customer base that expects perfection at every single touchpoint. But for the people who make it through that gauntlet, the badge on the building turns out to be one of the most resilient assets in the entire auto industry. Because the car in the showroom was never really the product, it was the entry point into a machine built to extract profit from every single stage of that vehicle's life, long after the customer drove it off the lot.